Beyond Technical. Competitive gaming.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to another episode of Beyond Technical. Today what we're going to be covering is a cool new game that I figured could use a little bit more of attention, even though it's getting a pretty decent amount of spotlight lately. It is called World of Tanks. So, I'm playing a little bit of this lately, and it's actually a really confusing game to get into, pretty simple to play, but there's a lot of questions that I personally had that I've been kind of delving through and figuring out over the past couple of weeks. So, what I thought I could do today is just create a basic beginner's primer. Everything in this is going to be very, very simple, very, very basic. We're just going to teach you guys what you need to do to start. So if you have a friend that wants to get into World Tanks, I'm hoping you can send them this video and say like, hey, here's what you need to know. Here's how you should get started. So I'm just going to try and go off the top of my head here. Nothing's really scripted or planned, and I'm just going to try and come up with ways to show you everything that you need to know to begin with. So there are multiple kinds of tanks. And let's see if we got my, all right, we're good. We've got my mouse over here. So there are a lot of different kinds of tanks. So the first thing I'm going to start off is when you start here, you can have all these tanks down at the bottom of your screen. They're going to be different tiers in different countries. The beginning of the game starts with a tier 1 from every country. So I suggest you give those tanks a shot and just get a feel for the basic game. Now, the beginner's primer is going to assume you know basic things for the game. Moving is WASD. Zooming in is shift. There is a tutorial that teaches you the basics of the game's controls. Two things the tutorial does not teach you in terms of controls. I'll just cover right now, get those out of the way. Tapping R. You tap it 1, 2, or 3 times to increase the speed of your tank. Generally, you're really going to go max speed or no speed, so that's really all you have to do. Tap R, it's like an auto drive function. It's really handy. The other one is X, I believe, or C. I think it's X. You hit X when you're playing artillery, and it roots your artillery, so it won't rotate and swivel, ruining your aiming. That's pretty much all there is to it. So, let's get into what the tanks are, because you might not even know what artillery is yet. So let's start there. Okay, I'm going to go with the American tech tree for beginners. Now, the first question I had when I played the game was, which country should I play? Because, like, what are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? How do I know where to begin? Because, like, look at this screen. There's a lot of stuff on the screen. That's just America. Got British, German, the French, Russians, and the nice and simple Chinese line that I decided to go down. So, let me explain how to sort this out. 1. Play the countries, and you can look up some information. There's plenty of like which country's best at what and how do they work, blah, blah, blah. At the end of the day, you're going to switch. I guarantee it. I don't know anybody who's started down one tree and stuck with it yet. So it doesn't matter what you pick first. Just pick what seems fun for now. You're going to hit a tier tank that sucks, and you're going to go, oh, this is awful. I made the wrong decision. You're going to switch because there's always a grindy tier of tank. So the different countries have different strengths and different weaknesses. I'll give you the very basic rundown of what I know, just to give you an idea. Americans are well-rounded. The British are really slow. No one seems to like the British tanks that I've spoken to yet, but there are a few people out there that play them. The Germans catch on fire a lot, but they have pretty good weapons and some really solid tanks. Their heavy line is pretty nice. The French tanks play a little bit more differently than the other tiers. They pretty much, all of their tanks, even their heavy tanks, play more like medium tanks, where they have good weapons and not necessarily the strongest armor, but that makes them really cool. And their artillery is apparently unmatched at the higher tiers. It can be a little bit frustrating at low tiers, but it's probably because it takes so much experience to level up artillery lines for pretty much any country. Now, the Russian tanks are also very solid tanks, good armor, good weapons, a little bit inaccurate as far as I've been able to tell so far. And but they do have some of the greatest tanks. The KV-1 that you can see I'm progressing towards right now is a Russian heavy tank. It's phenomenal for tier 5. I highly suggest anybody who's new and really doesn't care or know what they want to do, just go straight to that KV-1. You'll have a lot of fun. Make sure that you upgrade its gun and things like that, which we're going to cover in a minute in this video. The Chinese line's nice because it's very simple. There's really only one line to go down, so you don't have a lot of options to choose from, which is kind of one of the reasons that I picked it. I also started realizing how much I was enjoying my time with Chinese tanks. As you progress down, you basically end up picking medium or heavy. I don't know too many people to go with the lights. Light tanks are extremely frustrating to play in this game, and we're going to get into that in a minute too. Okay, so those are the countries, but what are the types of tanks? So we have a couple different kinds. We have light tanks, which are very quick. Their guns are sometimes good, sometimes bad. Usually they're kind of somewhere on the lower tier, and they die really quickly, but they can drive around really, really fast, which makes them great for scouting, capturing enemy bases. Basically, the mobility is their strength. The strength and mobility also means that when you're fighting somebody or if you're not going to win a fight and you know it, you need to run away. Light tanks cannot engage people. So if you want to play, if you want to be able to just get in there and fight people and muscle your way around the map, don't play light. Medium tanks are a nice mix of the two. You have a decent amount of mobility, but you're also not quite the strongest guy. I find that very frustrating personally because it's like I don't have a good strength in mobility and I don't have a great strength in fighting, so where really do I fit? The medium tank is a good, well-rounded tank. It fits for a lot of players. I've had an okay time in mediums, but I find myself always just kind of desiring that I was in a heavy tank instead. That's the next one we're going to talk about. Heavy tanks. Heavy tanks are well-armored. They bounce off a lot of bullets. They usually have some pretty solid guns, but they're really big, clunky, and slow. But in this game, the way that you hold positions in World Tanks means that heavy tanks are actually generally the most sought-after tanks. Everybody tries to play them. Most people end up aiming for a heavy tank eventually. The other two types of tanks are a little bit different. There are tank destroyers, which you can see this line on the American I've got partially discovered here. Tank destroyers are usually, not always, but usually a front-mounted turret, which means you can't spin all the way around on your turret. But they have a really strong front armor and a really good gun. So they just park themselves and they're camping. Their usual playstyle is to camp. So you camp and you just boom, blow the crap out of stuff when it gets close to you. Some of these are really fun. Specific mentions for any low tier players is definitely going to be the, I believe it's the French, no, sorry, not the French. The German line has one called the Hetzer. I believe it's German. Yes, here it is. The Hetzer. The German Hetzer is a phenomenal tank destroyer. If you want to play tank destroyers, I suggest checking that guy out. It's just a really solid tank for quite a long time. Has a really great gun on it too. The other tank type that I've been playing through is the artillery. Artillery basically plays very different than all the other tanks. The other tanks you can drive around, you're going to watch your tank. You're going to use your aiming reticule on the tank. The artillery tanks, actually you hit shift and it goes into a top-down map where you can actually move your little cursor all around the map. You can snipe. Then you get a big circle and it slowly shrinks down and you can try and one-shot some tanks from there. It's an interesting playstyle. It's actually quite strong, so a lot of the time you're going to be queued up against higher tier tanks, and as I said earlier, it takes more experience to level up an artillery than it does to level up something like, say, a medium or a light tank. So, those are our types of tanks. For you guys out there, pick whatever suits you best. Everybody plays differently. There really is no super weak option. Again, the easiest and clunkiest to play is usually the heavy tank. You just want to get in there, muscle your way around, and shoot people to death. Heavy tank is the way to go. If you like trying to stay back and snipe, try the artillery. And if you want to zip around the map and just be really annoying but not great at fighting, try a light tank. It's pretty fun to drive those around. Okay, so let's discuss tanks. I'm going to go with my Russian line here to give you guys a bit of an idea. Now, when you're unlocking things on a tank, you're going to start with your tier 1. Tier 1s don't have any repairs or anything along those lines. So it's very simple. Now, in terms of repairs, let's just cover that quickly while I'm mentioning it. You'll go to your tank and you'll click on service. So once you get to the tier 2 and above, you're going to have to actually service your tank. So there's two checkboxes, resupply or repair automatically and resupply automatically. I suggest ticking those so you don't ever forget what you're up to. And what you do is you can set the resupply rate so you can put as much ammo of each type as you want on your tank. Now, in terms of ammunition on tanks or the resupply, there's armor piercing ammo, there's high explosive ammo, which I find most people are very rarely using at low levels because the piercing rate is so low. Piercing means you punch through their armor and deal damage. A lot of shots in World Tanks just bounce off. So as you get to the kind of mid tiers, a lot of tanks, especially if you're shooting at higher tier tanks, you're going to struggle breaking their armor. That's why armor piercing rounds are usually your best bet. The AP composite rounds, which is this mid tier, they're the gold coin rounds, are your bot rounds with real money. They're absolutely the best. If you can afford them, buy those. But they're a lot of coins, and you're going to need coins for your upgrades. So I'm suggesting you hold off on those for now. But once you get to a tier that you're going to play for a while, definitely worth investing in a few of those. They're phenomenally good ammo. Other than that, you can resupply your consumables, which you can load up on your tank. There are multiple options for consumables. I'm not going to get too into those because they're pretty straightforward and they basically list what they do. But they don't get used up every round. So if you buy something you don't use it, it will stay on your tank. So a lot of those are good to have and to load your tank up. Again, usually I try to save that for a tank on a tier you're going to be playing for a while. All right, so back to the tech tree. Let's talk about how these tanks work. So you'll see as I'm upgrading these tanks, the boxes with the experience left on them are ones I have not upgraded. The boxes that have nothing there are the ones I have upgraded. And if you see a box with, I believe this tank has some of it, yes. You see a box with just money, it means that you've researched the upgrade, but you haven't purchased the upgrade for that particular tank, which can sometimes come in handy because you can research upgrades for higher level tanks on your lower level tanks. So, and sometimes you just don't want to get that weapon. Like I wanted this weapon, so I skipped this guy here, but I did still have to research it to get to that weapon. So when you first pick out a tank and you're going to start off, you go, okay, well, I like this Russian line, so I'm going to move up to the T26. That'll be my first purchase. So you have to research up to the T26, which means getting this 45mm gun researched, which was 125 experience, as you can see in that box there. And then you had to research and then buy the T46 to move up to the next tier. So you don't have to get every upgrade. I suggest when you're moving through the lower tiers, you skip out on a lot of stuff like armor, tracks, and engine. You really only need a gun and then to bump yourself up. You'll move through the tiers relatively quickly. I personally find around tier 5 is where the game gets a lot of fun, because you're going to start getting out. That's where the bulk of players seem to be sitting, is around the tier 5 tanks. That's usually what's achievable in a relatively decent amount of time. As you get better at the game, you're going to see your experience rises much, much faster. So the actual equipment itself, we'll pull up my tier 4 Russian tank here and we'll discuss this. So how did I pick this 57mm gun over this 76mm gun? There's a lot of numbers on there and they're confusing, so what do we do? All right, so the first thing you're gonna look at is rate of fire. It's pretty clear and straightforward, rounds per minute. So every minute that I'm shooting, I can shoot 13 rounds. So take 60 seconds, divide it by 13, you'll figure out how many shots per minute you're gonna get. Or you're gonna figure out how many seconds, it takes to reload your gun. So you're gonna get 13 shots per minute, which gives you, I believe it's like 3 or 4 seconds or something on a reload time. The next number is your penetration. Now, this number confused me at first because I thought it was like short, medium, long range, but it's actually your different types of ammo. That armor penetration ammo, the purchased ammo, and your heavy explosive ammo. So the armor pen is going to be basically your first line, and average damage and average penetration are going to be the ones you're looking at most often. So 37 and 105, which means 37 millimeter penetration on armor. So that means that my odds of going through, say, a tank with 100 armor, pretty much next to nothing. Now, armor penetration, I'll give you a quick primer on this because it's important, even though this is just a beginner thing. When you shoot a tank and it bounces off, you get frustrated. There are a few things you should note how to get through that armor. One, there are weak points. The back of a tank is usually the weakest point, but there are also specific weak points on specific tanks. It's kind of frustrating to learn when you're new because there's like 1,000 tanks, but as you get to the higher tiers, you're going to start realizing that you memorize certain points on certain tanks. It doesn't take that long to get used to it. The other thing is that armor penetration is affected at different ranges. So if you're shooting a tank from 50 meters away, you have your full armor penetration. For every 100 meters away that you go, the armor penetration gets worse. Also, this game has a random number generator based on the armor penetration. Apparently, it can fluctuate by 25%, good and bad, which means about a 50% fluctuation rate. Now, I know this is getting mathematical and everything, so follow me here. If I have 100 armor pen, and I shoot somebody and I get the 25% bonus on that, I'm going to hit them with 125 armor pen, which means I will punch through 125 points of armor at, say, point blank range. Now, if I shoot them and I get the negative version of that, I will hit them with 75% or 75 millimeters of armor penetration. So if they have 100 armor, they will defend against one shot and then get crushed by the next. That's how armor pen works. It's confusing. I still don't fully understand it myself, but that's a basic idea of how it works in this game. So realize that. You're going to want to aim for things. If you don't have a gun that can pen a heavy tank, but you're on a light tank, you can still shoot them in the wheels and disable them and do a lot of damage in terms of not actually damaging the tank, but debilitating their effectiveness in a battle. So average damage, pretty straightforward. That's what you're probably going to hit for. That's pretty close to what I hit for, so it gives you an idea. Accuracy at 100 meters is how big the circle is going to be. So a bigger number is worse because bigger means you're going to have a bigger circle to aim for. So you want that circle to be tight and small. So the lower the number, the better. Aiming time means how long, when you're driving along, you're bumping along the road, you need a couple seconds to aim, right? So you stop and then you aim on your target. How long it takes that circle to shrink to its accuracy at 100 meters number. All right. So, and weight is just weight on the tank, which can be affected. You might have to equip different tracks to basically sustain different weights on your tank, and different bodies will support different guns. You might need to get a body before you get the gun. All right. Sorry, I know this is a lot of information to absorb, but it's taken me weeks of research to figure all this out, and I'm just trying to share it with you in a very, very quick video, so I'm just rambling it all out there. Now, the difference between these guns, for example. This first gun has a 13.04 rate of fire. This second gun has a 22.22 rate of fire. So this is a lot faster. It's almost twice as fast as my first gun. The penetration is also the number that I really care about. The average damage actually goes down. So this 75mm gun has a bigger punch to it. It hits for 105 versus 85, but I can shoot more often, and I have 112 armor penetration, which is super important because armor penetration is a really, really vital stat in this game. you'll get really frustrated really quickly when you play and you go, oh my god, I can't even hurt this guy. Patink, 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 patink. Oh, that one bounced off. You're going to hear it constantly. Trust me, as you get better at the game, you'll figure out ways around it, but it's definitely had me ready to quit early on because of how aggravating it is as a new player not understanding how armor penetration properly works. All right, other quick stats on your armor. So here we've got the armor up. It has 20, 20, 20, which is, it literally labels it on the side. Front, sides, and rear. So the sides of your tank have 20 armor, the front of your tank has 20 armor, and the back has 20 armor. Which means shooting this tank in the back isn't necessarily beneficial. Again, though, the weak points are often very located in the back, so it's usually got some benefit there. The view range is how far you'll be able to see. So like lower, shorter, smaller tanks are going to have small view ranges because they can't quite, see as high up. And the really tall tanks, which are easier to hit, are also going to have really good view ranges. This next one is your sensor range, which actually lets you communicate with your teammates and sense other enemy vehicles. Now, the neat thing about this game is that if somebody spots something on your team, you can see it. So they're gonna send a signal to you. So if you have a 300 meter sensor and they have a 300 meter sensor and you're 600 meters apart, you're gonna see each other on the minimap. You're gonna communicate all that information. So sensor range is important because it actually doubles. Because for every 10 meters you get and every 10 meters your ally gets, you get another 20 meters. So you got to count their sensor range in with yours. So having a good sensor is actually pretty important at higher tier play. Again, in the beginning, don't worry about your sensor. It's okay. You'll be fine without it. Engine's pretty straightforward. It has horsepower, and there's a % chance of fire on impact. So when your engine gets hit, it can also burst into flames. If your vehicle bursts into flames, you're pretty much done. Unless you have a fire extinguisher on board, in which case you might be able to save your tank. Early tiers, not going to happen. So 20% might seem really high, but I don't think I've ever had this Russian tank burst into flames, so I'm doing all right so far. The engine doesn't get hit that often. The horsepower is just going to change how much strength your tank has. So more horsepower means you're going to be able to climb hills easier. You're going to get more, usually some more acceleration off the bat. So the heavier your tank is, the more important horsepower, even just a little bit of horsepower, is going to become. All right, tracks, pretty easy. Load limit, how much weight can your tank hold, and traverse speed, degrees per second. The tracks really affect how quickly you can get up and down hills. So you might not think that's important right now, but you'll realize how bad these tanks are in this game at climbing hills. It can really matter to get up that hill an extra 5 or 10 kilometers faster. It'll save you a lot of the time. All right, so that's how the basic tech tree works. It's kind of confusing at first, but you're going to figure out what you want to buy as you go. And after a few tiers, you're going to realize like which tanks you should be basically maxing out and which tanks you can just kind of power on through to the next tier. And sometimes which upgrades you should pick up and which upgrades you should avoid. So let me just talk very quickly about premiuming your tank, or eliting, sorry. This tank has this little elite symbol. You see that, guys? That means that I've researched all the upgrades on the tank. So when you do that, you can do what's called pushing your experience to, or accelerated crew training. The way that that works is that all the experience you acquire on the tank no longer goes to the tank, it actually goes into your crew. This is a good idea because crew is actually really important. Again, beginner primer, we're not going to dive too much into that, but crew getting up to 100%, they can get special skills. It's pretty big difference between a tank with a bad crew and a tank with a good crew. All right, so here we can get our standard information about our tanks. So you can see their hit points when you select a tank, their weight and load limit, basically everything you're going to need to know. All that stuff I talked about from the tech tree is going to relate here as well. So most of these stats are things that we've already discussed. Now, the other thing is there's gold, which is going to be for buying upgrades and buying tanks. So when you buy a new vehicle, you have to spend gold on it. So this is it's actually silver coins, but it's your coins. So coins are going to buy you the things. Experience is going to unlock you the things. Now the other stat you get is called free experience, and that's this number up here. Free experience means it's not tied to an individual tank. When you play around and your tank gets 100 XP, that tank gets 100 XP. You don't get 100. You might get 10 free experience. That 10 free experience can be used on anything. So right now, if I go in the tech tree, I have 3,000 experience. I can buy, like pretty much any tier 2 I want because they're like 130 XP. I can just spend that right away. So I don't even have to play a tier 1 German tank to get a tier 2 German tank. I can just unlock that with XP. Again, I'd have to go down the tree and get everything in the way, but I could use my free experience to do that. So that's how free experience works. It accumulates extremely slowly. You can see I have 13,000 XP on this tank. I have 10,000 XP on this tank, and I only have 3,000 total free experience. It takes a long time to generate that. So save it up, and generally the best way to use it is, one, definitely use it, and boost your tank when you get a new tank. So when you get a new tier of tank and it has a really cool gun on it, use that free XP to power yourself to that gun so you can get to the fun part. So that's the other thing I just quickly want to touch on is how frustrating some tiers are. there are certain tiers of tanks that are dreadful and awful. And usually you're going to go, oh my god, how did I mess this up? Why did I pick this country or this tank line or whatever? Usually the tank after that, or the two down the road, is really, really good. So like the French are the greatest example. They have the worst low tier tanks in the game. They're horrendous. You play them and you're just like, this thing feels like a lawnmower. But if you can struggle through that lawnmower, they actually have some of the best tanks in the game at the end. So usually every time you hit a struggle, just remind yourself that this struggle isn't so bad, because it's actually going to get really good down the road. All right, I think we've covered pretty much everything. When you need to get rid of your tanks, you just right-click on them. I'm just gonna do it over here just in case I accidentally mess this up, and click down on Sell. So you can sell away the old tanks and create new space for other tanks. Now, this game is free to play for anybody who hasn't actually downloaded or tried it yet, which means that they're gonna try and make some money somewhere. So the biggest thing that they use is, I have a standard account, but you can buy premium. You can see all the pricing on here. I believe a month is something like 15, 20 bucks for a month of premium. So that gives you an idea of like, that's about 2,500 coins is probably about $20. So that's your pricing for different durations of premium. And that gives you 50% more experience and money at the end of every battle, which means you're going to progress 50% faster through the game. A lot of people find that useful. I don't like to pay for games just for progression personally, so I hold off on that. I do have some friends that have premium. They seem to be pretty big fans of it. And that's also how you're going to get gold. You can pull up the website here. I'm gonna have to log in for that, so we're not gonna show you that purchasing right now. But you can buy gold. Buying gold will give you access to what's called premium tanks and other different upgrades. For example, like that ammo is 5 gold per shot, for example. So you can spend, say, $10 and buy this T25 Elite Medium tank right away. So you can go right from Tier 1 to Tier 5, and boom, you have a Tier 5. Or you can spend a lot of money and get a Tier 8. So I'm going to suggest against doing this, but if you do end up spending some money on the game, pick up one of these premium tanks, because it's a really good, they're called moneymaker tanks. You play these tanks and you earn a lot of coins. And coins, eventually, in the beginning it feels like you have unlimited coins, you can buy whatever you want and just money falls from the sky. Eventually those coins are going to run out and you're going to need coins more than you need XP. So having a nice moneymaker tank is pretty nice, but again, you can just do what I've done and elite out one of your other tanks and use that as your money tank. So when your other tanks are in queue or currently in battle, you're getting stuck with that. So that's pretty much the basics of the game's engine. The next video, if we can pump one of these out anytime soon, is going to be about actual gameplay, but this should give you a pretty good beginner's primer on how to play World Tanks, what all those numbers mean, and what's going on. If you have any questions, please ask them down in the comments. I will check that and reply to the video. I'm pretty busy over the next little while, so I don't know how often I'm going to have these videos coming out, but stay posted. Click on the subscribe button so it can send you an email or something every time I make a new video if you want to see what's coming up. And follow the channel, whatever like button. There's a Facebook link and stuff all over the place. So thank you very much for watching Beyond Technical. Hope you guys enjoyed. I hope this was pretty informative, as I know this game was really confusing when I started off. So if there's anything I missed, apologize. We'll pick it up in the next one. Catch you guys later.